Is there an authentic Macedonian policy? Because it looks to me that Macedonia is following some other policy, some other country's agenda, and authentic Macedonian policy for me is to be of the free world, of the West, and part of the European Union. But that's not happening.
We did actually reading of some documents and analysis of the early 20th century of Brailsford, I think was, and he was exactly saying that this was what Macedonian Bulgarians felt like. They were much more anti-Russian than Bulgarians in then Principality of Bulgaria, and much more pro-Western and pro sort of Salonika focused, when the idea of having sort of an autonomous and then later independent state. Now, of course, this version of the Macedonian identity and population is very different from 1905. Things have changed a lot in the last 120 years, so to say. And as a result of this change, so I actually, well, of course, we have Europe is an arena where you have this big clashes between the sort of pro-Russian, pro-Chinese stance, which is sort of intended to undermine the West and the Western institutions and the Western tools, the Western security architecture, if you want to put it. And of course, small disputes, whether it's Bulgaria and Macedonia, whether it's Bosnia and Serbia, or the status of Republika Srpska, whether it's Kosovo and Kosovo Albanians versus the Serbs, even Slovenia, Croatia, any of this could be a very useful tool to divide, basically, so these divisions and to undermine the whole integration project, to undermine the whole process of integrating Europe whole and free, what we have. So, yes, but that being said, we have to be very cautious, and I'm against, and we need to be very cautious when we say, oh, it's the Serbs and the Russians that are sitting in their chairs, and every single day they're coming up with conflictual narratives, and they're almost like they're sitting on the sidelines and managing or coaching the conflict between Bulgaria and Macedonia, particularly between the Macedonian government and Bulgaria, because it seems that the Macedonian government these days is waging this war. It's actually, a lot of this is homegrown, and it's homegrown because it's when you create a narrative that is exclusive. This is the one thing that in the last 35 years the Macedonian society has created a sense of Macedonism, a Macedonian identity that is exclusive. It is somebody who is Slavic, who potentially claims Asian roots, from antiquity, somehow mixed up with the Slavs. They're still working on getting that mixture, played out. And it is not Bulgarian, Greek, Albanian, Serbian, or anything else. So this is exclusive. We are unique, and we're very different from everybody else. Instead of saying, hey, we're actually inclusive, everybody who is part of that story in the region, could be Serbs, Bulgarians, Greeks, Romanians, Blacks, you name it, they're all part of us, That would have been much easier to manage and digest, But they chose to go in a different direction, Georgi. And that exclusive narrative has created a sense that, okay, now our exclusivity is being threatened by people from all around the world. It was mostly the Greeks and the Bulgarians, because they have the tools, to do that. And because of that, it has become sort of a homegrown nationalist resistance. So I'm more on the camp side to say, hey, this is actually a merger, unholy alliance between this homegrown exclusivity that has led to this anti-European nationalist agenda that says, okay, we got to abandon the treaty with Greece, we got to abandon the treaty with Bulgaria. There's no way we can have good relations with these people. We can do whatever we do. If we need to eat roots, we will eat roots in the wood, but we will fight against our neighbors because all we have is our pride and our national identity, this sense of exclusivity. So it has, of course, merged very successfully with the Serbian and Russian interests. Russian interests, again, long-term are to destabilize the EU, because basically EU is the one that is putting sanctions and pressure on Russia. So if you destabilize them, they're not going to be able to make any decisions. So that's long-term interest. They're seeing themselves as an alternative. And the Serbs, of course, have pure historical aspirations, over a large part of the Balkans, the so-called Serbian world, which, again, I'm not an expert on, but have seen and read and understood enough to know that Serbian world expands mostly in Bosnia, parts of Montenegro. Serbian influence is very powerful bits of Kosovo, at least, whatever they can. Of Kosovo is actually the, what do you call that? The heart and soul of Serbia, the Holy Land, and of course in Macedonia. And this is the weirdest thing, actually. We're seeing that Serbian historians and podcasters and politicians have no problem saying, oh, well, this is an old Serbia and they're all Southern Serbs, and when they say that, of course, somehow Skopje people and celebrate battles where it was clear that Macedonians and the Macedonian elite was against the expansion of Serbian influence in the Balkan Wars and the First World War, and they have no problem going and celebrating them, which is how perverted this nationalism is, and it's to us it's extremely weird, but somehow they were able to create that merger of homegrown nationalism on the one hand and the foreign interest, and I think the purpose they're doing. So Serbs, of course, enjoy their status and their ability to penetrate and expand their influence in North
They even
Macedonia.
have a minister, right?
Right, yeah, and of course everybody, but it's a minister who's born there who says that the only citizenship that he has is Macedonia, but he represents the Serbian community there, So why am I saying all of this? I think there's a bigger plan here on the part of the Macedonian elite and on the part of the security services, the so-called UDBA or whatever, the deep state, their purpose is not so much to show love for Serbia for the sake of the love of Serbia, but their purpose is to show to the Bulgarians, hey, listen, if you don't raise the historical question, if you just leave our narrative alone, if you just play ball, support us you can have exactly the same thing that the Serbs have, We'll go
this is called emotional blackmail.
Yes. So, see, this is what they have it, but the reason why they have it is because they play ball, If you play ball, you will have the same thing. And I've been told many, many times when I go to North Macedonia, you just do what the Serbs do, and you'll be fine. You'll be actually much better positioned than they because you're wealthier, you're in the EU, you have all the tools they do. And that's there. And this is actually pro-Serbian Serbianization policy started particularly after Bulgaria, well, I wouldn't even call it imposed veto, but rather objected to the negotiating framework, the initial version of the German presidency in 2020, which basically delayed the starting of the negotiations. Yes.